Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody. It's time to begin. I originally wanted to start at 9 o'clock, but I ended up having to edit my time to move it to 9:30. You may or may not have caught that, but if not, we're here now. So have not left you guys hanging. We want to go ahead and get things started because I know it's a late time at night. Want to make sure everything's set and ready to go. And it looks like we are ready to go. So you make sure you follow the page, and follow the page, right? So show some love, support, and let's go ahead and get things started. So first of all, we um, we've basically been talking about the topic of the table, right? What do you bring to the table? And we haven't been having the discussion the same way that people of the past have always had discussion. I've been just kind of approaching it my new way. I just, instead of trying to convince somebody of what you do bring and all this other stuff, whether you convince somebody or not, I don't really care about. Uh, you could be fine with who you are and just be yourself. And if somebody recognizes the table you have to offer, great. If they don't, you can keep it moving, right? But I do want to make sure that people know what are the different ways that people do provide value to the table, including themselves. So there are a lot of folks that may not know what they have to offer. And I want to make sure that everybody knows what they do have to offer. Some people know that they labor a lot, and whatever they do, it is important, and people tend to value it. So that's what we're going to talk about. Last week we talked about two of what I would say are the different types of people. But I mean, the type, I don't like to call it types just because um, it gives you the idea that you fit into one of these four categories, right? And we talked about two of them yesterday. But it's not so much that we fit into this box or that box or anything. We actually go into all four of these boxes at different points of our lives. We meddle around and wade in different pools at different times, right? And so we all have these different qualities and provide these different values in different ways. However, some of us spend a whole lot more time working on the discipline of one blocks, right? Practicing the arts that are within a certain box. And so that we kind of have a mastery of that, and that's kind of our natural element. This is our expertise. This is the strongest pull that we offer to the other folks, and folks see those qualities in us, and it attracts other folks quite a bit, right? So there may be one area that may hit a lot stronger than some of the other ones, right? Or maybe a couple areas, not just one, not just two. All right, but we all spend different varying amounts of times. Sometimes you might feel like, hey, more naturally I fit in this box, but I put a lot of my effort in trying to work in another box, right? And sometimes you got to think about factors of, sometimes some of us are born with natural abilities. Think about, let's say, LeBron James or something like that, right? Just his body's like a freak of nature sometimes. Of course, he works hard and in the gym and eats right and all that other stuff to help build on top of it as well. But there's just certain people like Vince Carter and all that stuff that have a unique level of athleticism that are just out of the gym. That whereas, let's say like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, I don't think their body is necessarily as unique that you can't find it in other players that are able to do similar type of things. However, especially in the case of Kobe Bryant, but they pushed themselves to the limit. They had to work extra hard. It's like me as a math professor. I always had a math aptitude, so I didn't have to study too hard in math classes. It came pretty easy for me. Whereas some other folks may have to study hard in order to get the same results, right? And so when people talk about that Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality, right? You got to put that extra effort in to get what you want. Whether you have an aptitude, you're born with a certain gifts or talents or whatever or not, you can always get better and stronger in certain areas than others if you want to put that effort in. If it value, you value doing that, right? Everybody can't be a master of everything though. Just there's just not enough years in our lives to be able to do such a thing. And also some of these things kind of trade off with each other. If you master more in one area, it's kind of hard or almost impossible to be as strong of a master in another area. Um, so you have to, in order to even for Kobe Bryant to be strong in the areas that he was in, he had to sacrifice other areas of his life. When he's in the gym practicing all hard, he's not spending as much time in other places, maybe with his family and so on and so forth. So there, you, in order to win in certain areas, you lose in other areas. There's sacrifices that happen across the board. And we talked about those things last time. So just to recap what the conversation was about in terms of sensation versus perception. Let me see. Let me give me one moment while I want to make sure I'm able to see the comments that are going on, if there are any so far. All right. There we go. Hold on. All right. Hold on. Where's the... I don't even see my own post. Let me refresh my page real quick. All right. Give me one moment before we get into this thing. There. All right, there we go, right there. All right. Hey, Kim, I see you there in the comments. All right, let's get it started. All right, so we're here. We're ready to go. All right, so just to recap what those first two categories there. First, and we have across two domains of the mental versus the perceptual. But in that first column, we talked about the person's personal experience. I talked about how it's very emotion based, and also it's all about the human experience, how we connect with one another, basically, and connect to our environment. And so the first way physically is through our sensations, our senses. We talked about how our five senses, like how some people have a stronger taste. They're emotionally pulled, either negatively or positively by their taste experience in stronger ways. Chefs can be, have a stronger aptitude in these different regions, and or the smell, certain smells, it just hits certain folks' emotions like, no, I gotta go, I can't even do it, I'm about to throw up. Whereas other folks can stomach it a lot easier, right? Even though it's bad for everybody. And the same thing on the opposite end in terms of positive smells. You're trying to get the incense and all that stuff to get your environment the way it has to be, to create an emotional experience. Sensualists, they tend to be big on those type of things, right? And not just that, the music, the atmosphere, what you hear, tones of voices, those things can have huge impacts relative to folks that don't really care as much about that type of stuff, or it just doesn't affect them on nearly the same type of scale. They like to have a lot of these things together, combined together, right? Give me my food so I can enjoy that type thing. Give me my TV so I can watch some stuff visually. Give me my something, I can listen to the TV as well, right? So I'm getting that entertained as well. Might be able to get a heat pad or a massage going on my shoulders, maybe my feet rubbed or something like that at the same time. They like to have even the ambiance of the whole room and have everything set up. I talked also about how the cleanliness of the environment might trigger anxieties if it's not clean, if it's not together. It's hard for them to rest and just ignore it and go on. They need to have this stuff together. And in some households, that creates a lot of friction. Because maybe their partner is not so much of a sensual, and so they're not triggered by their environment nearly as much, and so they're not as motivated to get it together right away. They might be more like, if I'm tired, I'm just not gonna do it. I'll do it when I get to it. Whereas the sensual is like, oh my gosh, this is weighing on me every second it's here. And so and if there's no communication or understanding exactly what the sensual is going through, then people may not fully understand and appreciate, what type of labor the sensual is going through and having to deal with that. And also, a lot of sensualists end up being in charge of cleaning up and getting our home together and stuff like that because they're more sensitive to environment and atmosphere, and the standard that it takes to get them to be satisfied and at peace and comfortable and in their good zen space tends to be higher than people who are not. And so therefore, when other folks start doing this, like, hey, you missed the spot type of thing. So understanding what type of people we are can get us a long way. There's a lot of folks that are out there like, hey, I don't even want to be in a relationship no more. I get so stressed out by being with somebody. The peace that comes with being in my own space and me not messing it up because I'm a sensual in myself, that just goes a long way. And that's perfectly cool. I think sometimes we look down on other folks because we feel like, we shouldn't look down on other folks. We just understand we wired differently. A lot of times, whether it's by nature or by nurture, we're just different types of people in different arts, and we can just respect each other in different arts and just understand. And through that understanding, through that empathy, through that sympathy, we can be able to create the type of spaces where people can understand each other a little bit better, that they can find solutions that might be able to allow us to, get what we want. Because, sensuals, they want love and connection too. They don't want to have to be forced to be by themselves, right? But also there's tolls that come on as well, being around people that aren't sensuals themselves. Because a lot of times we may not be, if we master in one area of the table, we tend to often be attracted to people that are in other areas of the table, right? That have different skills and different things to come with this. A lot of times it's about complementing more than it is about more of the same. We may think we want more of the same, but a lot of times we're drawn to people with complementary characteristics. All right. So, with all of that said and all of that done, that kind of gives you an idea of the sensuals. The perceptionist, and that's the mental aspect of the personal experience. So instead of the sensations, that you have your perceptions, and your perceptions is just how you view things, right? It's whether the glass is half full or half empty. And so a perceptionist is going to regulate their emotional experience through life by looking at situations in different view. They often automatically, subconsciously, a lot of times, because they've done it so much, uh, are working to flip things and look at things a totally different way. That's going to have a make them feel better about themselves, their environment, and everything else. So they are less dependent on their outside circumstances, and more dependent on their own internal ability to be able to perceive things differently. So they tend to be strong at rhetorical arguments, and things like that, and not just their own. Not only are they good at that with themselves, but they're also good at being able to use those skills with other folks. So they can say the things the right, smooth ways to be able to convince, persuade, and have an influence on other folks as well. Often. Uh, so, some people may focus more inwardly than outwardly, and vice versa. But usually, if you have skills in one area, you're going to have skills in both, and so you're going to take advantage of both of them. And of course, we all spend some time in that domain as well. So none of us are free from it. And so that means we're all potentially threats from the manipulative side of things that we all kind of naturally see as a possibility. Because, somebody with a smooth tongue, and they're very sensitive to social cues and things like that. So they move the right way, they look the right way, they wink their eyes the right way, they lick their lips the right way, they swing the hips the right way, they wear the right outfits to fly. They're paying attention to all those social cues, like, oh, so people are liking the posts where the people look like this. So, okay, I'm gonna have to do that too. It's like, or people are the guy with the nice car over there. Oh, he's getting all that attention. Okay, I'm gonna have to show up with a nice whip too. So instead of putting furniture in my house, I'm gonna use that money to get me a nice whip or something. Whatever it is. So a perceptionist can do a lot of things in order to create the perception that they need in order to get the things that they need in life, whether it's attention from other folks, jobs and stuff like that. We have George Santos, for example. That was the politician who lied about his whole resume and ended up winning his way into office, but they ended up kicking him out eventually, basically. And they filed some charges against him for some stuff as well in that process. But at the end of the day, there's some folks who will create a totally false perception. And there's some of us that are a little bit more naive than the rest of us that don't think that, no, people wouldn't lie about that. Or just give everybody named mama the benefit of the doubt and don't realize that, hey, there's some people out here that will try to sell you some snake oil. All the way up to the highest offices in the land, running for those offices. So you have to be a little bit more, on your guard for those types of folks. So ethics goes behind all these things. They have their pros and cons. But we spent some time talking about that. I won't spend too much time today rehashing those boundaries. But I want to make sure I say it, lay that basic foundation there before we go ahead and talk about the global experience. All right. So it's not so much about the one-to-one connection, the emotional connection, regulating our emotional states, but it's more so about how do you interact with the global environment and the universe around you, basically. And on the physical level, how do we physically react with our environment? Well, we have a lot of physical threats and physical opportunities in our environment. And so when it comes to our physical experience, I'm going to go ahead and add the other two columns on here now. We have two different dimensions here. We have the labor and defense, and then we also have our intellect for the mental aspect of things. So when I say labor expense, physically, right? You got physical labor, people that can use their strength to be able to move things, build things, create things, right? Put in the effort that gets our environment running. Even during the pandemic, we have folks that were essential workers. Like, how do you, get people that your food on the trucks that actually get to you? And there's a lot of things that are very critical. Some dirty jobs. Let your garbage man stop taking the trash for a whole month and see what happens. How funky some folks' house will start smelling. Or if they don't, they still take it outside the house. How bad the neighborhood starts looking and smelling when everybody puts their stuff outside, right? Some of the basic things that we take for granted. There's a lot of folks who provide value to our society and to other folks by the labor that they do, right? The hardcore labor. So I think to a certain extent we recognize it, but at the same time there's been a decreased appreciation of certain forms of labor, right? People who used to do manual labors for the same type of work don't get paid the same amounts over time, and so where other areas have also increased their amount of pay, and opportunities and different things like that. So we don't fully appreciate that. But I've also thrown the defense part in because, right, in order to be able to survive, you face some threats. You got to be able to defend yourself from threats, whether they are threats in the wild, threats of natures, and such as hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff. Being able to defend, protect, that fight, warfare, that all that stuff comes into under this label. So these are the physical ways that people provide value to each other, and some of us gravitate towards people who can give us that level of security. Security in a lot of different respects, right? Because from the labor aspect of it, we work with money in our current modern society, and that money allows us to be able to get the things we need, right? From the basic essentials, our necessities, food, clothing, shelter, that type of stuff, all the way to the luxuries of life as well, right? But so labor allows us to be able to get that, and it gives us a level of security based on that labor. And some of us, a lot of people put a lot of value on money, right? People say the money makes the world go round. So to a certain extent, there's a lot of eyes that focus on this labor dimension and put a whole lot of weight to it. And that's why I wanted to make sure I spent a lot of time yesterday focusing on some of the other dimensions that didn't include it, so that we actually did appreciate what those other dimensions have to bring to the table. Because I spent a lot of time talking about how emotionally connected the sensualists are and the perceptionists are. Because they have to be emotionally connected in order to pick up on these cues, these social cues and things. And because they are so emotionally connected, the people that aren't as emotionally connected will gravitate towards those. And so, and I talked about how I actually prefaced that there are maybe some people we'll talk about today, people that aren't as emotionally collected. All right, a lot of times as you delve deeper into those, and so I'll get into that as well. And people that aren't as emotionally collected often might gravitate to people who are, because that helps them to connect to their emotions. That helps them to see their emotions. A lot of times, somebody that's emotionally connected will be able to notice in their mate when something's off before they do. Because they notice that their energy's different, right? A lot of folks, perceptionists especially, they're following people's energies a lot. They're following vibes, trying to catch those and connect and all that other stuff. So people put a lot of weight in those type of things. They often are perceptionists in a lot of cases. And the key thing about perception is that might separate it from an intellectual. The bottom right corner, I haven't talked about that much yet, is that, again, in my definition of an intellectual, it's more truth-based, right? Perceptionist can be truth, can be false. It really doesn't matter. The aspect is really less important, more so regulating my emotional, where I am emotionally. But intellectually, it's more so I don't care how I feel. It's what's the actual truth. And so this where you get the separation from the emotions that come on, because in the labor and defense, as well as the intellectually based areas, people are tend to often be less emotionally connected. Why would you say that? Well, the reason why is that's not a 100% hard and fact rule, because we have a society that likes to fit us in some of these boxes, especially according to our genders, right? We have different traditions of seeing people work in certain of some of these places of areas of the tables versus others. And so sometimes people that may more naturally be, I don't know, maybe essentialists, but by society's traditions and stuff might be pressured to be more of a laborer. or something like that, right? Or try to be a more of defense, even though that person might be quite scrawny and not able to fight very much, right? So we often look at people and fit them in the boxes based on their gender in a lot of cases. Um, so with that said, in general though, if you are a laborer, let's say you go, you work 40 plus hours a week, 60 hours, whatever it ends up taking in order to put your food on the table and make things run and everything, have your family be content, uh, that ends up being a labor of sacrifice, often in jobs that are stressful, high stress, very competitive, and require a lot of dedication and hard work. Several hours out of every day, you spend more times your day working than you do on yourself and your own free time to yourself, right? And so a lot of the time you don't want to actually go to work. I can go through social media and scroll down every day and hear somebody complaining about, oh my gosh, I got to go to work and all this sort of stuff. I need somebody to pay my bills for me, blah blah blah, yakety smackety, right? And so if you allow your emotions to come into it, how you feel about going to work, if that becomes a heavy weight on what you do, it's going to be hard for you to do what you're going to do, especially if you're strongly emotionally connected. And that's something that you use as a guide to lead you and be in tune, your intuition through, to be able to read the environment, stuff like a sensualist or a perceptionist. If that's what you actually want to do, you want to be in tune with your emotions and follow that. I deserve to be happy, and so I'm just going to do whatever I feel at the moment. If that's you and how you move, it's going to be hard for you to be a laborist in a job that you don't like. And there's a lot of jobs in society that almost nobody likes, but somebody has to do it. Otherwise, the lights don't stay on, right? Your sewage doesn't move out of your house and get treated and stuff like that. And so on and so forth. So a lot of folks, in order to be able to do what they have to do to make the money that they have to make, in order to be able to get the mates that will be attracted to them, so they can reproduce, have offspring and family, and have their different dreams and goals. What's standing between them and that often might be a job, being able to produce the labor that it requires to do that work. And so what do? They might have to turn their emotions out. There's an emotional sacrifice, and I talked about yet last time the sacred sacrifice of the sensuals and perceptionists of holding on to their emotions, because that's a roller coaster in and of its own right. It can fluctuate up and down. It can lead you to do something in a moment because it locks you into the moment with your emotions. So it allows you to do things in the moment that you might regret later on down the road and be like, what was I thinking? When because emotions can be all over the place, right? There's a sacred sacrifice that happens with that, but also people value from it, right? We value our perceptionists, we value our sensualists, and gravitate to them because of that nature that's about them. However, and so there's a sacrifice that happens because of that. And I also mentioned how the perceptionists, they even, because they adapt to what other people want so much, that they often lose their own identity. So that's they sacrifice their own identity in order to please the identities of others, to be the seductive presence that everybody tends to crave and desire, and so on and so forth. So our perceptionists are very popular. They're our politicians. You have to be a good perceptionist to be a good politician. It's not good enough to be an intellectualist and have all the right answers. You can be smart as you want to be, have all the right answers, be a scientist or whatever, but if you don't know how to connect with the people and talk the right way and show up and look the right part and look confident and show confidence the way you say it, because if you say it in a trembling voice and look like you're doing all this, but you might be 100% correct, there are people that will not vote for you because they want somebody tough, who shows courage, who knows how to stand up to Putin, whatever, whoever the enemy of the day is, right? So there's a lot of perception and stuff that has to go on in order for society to run. And a lot of us crave and only are willing to deal with perceptionists in a lot of different capacities. It's just is what it is. We can make the decision to change from that if we wanted to, but I don't think there's ever been a period of history where people have not liked perceptionists quite a bit. All right. And again, like I said, with the George Santos example, you can say Donald Trump or anybody, a lot of the folks who are highly all about projecting an image and saying they can fix everything. They're better and smarter than everybody else at everything. They've never done anything wrong. It's always the victim. Yeah, other folks coming for me, and I'm gonna protect you from the other folks. They're not coming for me. They're really coming for you. Those types of folks that sell the snake oil, they're popular. They wouldn't make it as high as they do if they didn't do the things that they do, and they wouldn't make, and they are a reflection of us. I don't like to off scapegoat all these people as bad people, because they're really reflections of us. They wouldn't even be the people that they are if it didn't work so well on the rest of us. And so if we let's see, I need to plug my computer in. My computer is starting to talk to me and say, hey, plug me in. I'm gonna turn off on you, sir. I'm like, okay, I hear you. And we have juice. All right. So they are our mirrors. They are our reflections. You cannot get as mad at them without actually getting mad at yourself or us as a country if we're responsible for the people being there. You know, whether it's the media, because we're the one that gives them the ratings, that state keeps them in business. They reflect back the type of information to us that keeps them in business. If it didn't work, they'd be out of business, right? Or whether it's social media, the algorithms, you know, all whatever they reflect back to us what our likes are. They want to put up there what keeps us clicking, and then we look back at them like, hey, those algorithms are feeding us this nonsense, and I don't like the algorithms anymore. Well, if you don't like the algorithms, then you don't like yourself, because they're feeding you back what you like. All right. So you have to realize, from the perceptionist perspective, marketers, perceptionists, lawyers, you know, it helps to have some intellect, but at the end of the day, it's perceptionist. You just want to be able to make sure that you can convince a judge or a jury to believe in what you want them to believe in at the end of the day. You know, a spokesperson, a lot of different employments in that area. But anyways, I don't want to get too far off track and repeat too much of what I said yesterday. Last time, you want to make sure you watch that video. But the labor and defense folks, like I said, labor, it's hard to be connected to your emotions if you're working hard every day. You know, and if you're doing that sacrifice. So sometimes you have to disconnect, because it'll tear you apart if you have to do that day in, day out, without end. Because there's a lot of folks that may not appreciate you because of all, unless you're producing something. There's a lot of folks who's like, you know, especially when we talk about the gendered aspects of the roles a lot of time in our society. You know, what's a man is worthless if you ain't got a job, that type of stuff, you know. So a lot of times it's kind of like what you do is the center of your worth, which is something slightly different, because when it comes to the personal experience column, right, and the sensationalist and perceptionist, it's actually the physical person that has the actual, you know, that is drawing the people in. You know, the sensualist, their emotions are actually what actually turns people on and attracts them to them, from a relationship perspective, right? Perceptionist, again, the way that they move, their vibes, their energy, it's the actual person that draws and attracts in that particular case. In a sense of a laborist, it's the product that they produce. It's the money, it's the house, and it's the stuff that they can get in their life. And so sometimes people, that separation from the actual individual can create a sensation where the person doesn't feel valued in and of themselves. It's like, man, I see people value the stuff that I bring, but I don't see them value me. They sometimes, the people around them that say they value them, we if you're a laborist, you can be like, man, they don't. It seems like they don't give a freak about me. You know, I could be going through any and everything, and nobody would even care. When I complain about stuff, they expect me to just be tough and tough it out, and that's my duty, and that's what I'm supposed to do. Uh, and so it's kind of like you're in this by yourself type of thing. And so it gets dark, it gets lonely, and so therefore, because it gets tough, that's even further incentive for a lot of these folks to separate emotionally from what's going on. So just to try to help explain what all goes into this, because if you have a high, because we're in the area of standards, everybody's expecting high standards and not cutting standards and all this other stuff, and a lot of times those standards may have a dollar amount, and the laborists, a lot of times they are people that's bringing in dollar amounts in, because of their sacrifice of that type of labor. Well, we want the dollar amount, but we got to also appreciate what comes with that. And again, you get some type of emotional disconnection a lot of times, uh especially, you know, the more that they're more into this, more into the arts of the discipline of this specific area of labor and defense. So it's not just the labor, the defense aspects too, the folks who provide protection for folks, because people, again, they want security as well. There's some folks that, hey, they expect their partners to be willing to die on their behalf, all the way up to the ultimate sacrifice of their lives, not just fight and beat some folks up, but also be able to take a pew pew right on their behalf. So say that instead of get around any Facebook's jail type stuff, but the pew pews instead of the actual words. But yeah, people have a high standard of wanting that security, and so the second somebody doesn't meet it, a lot of times their relationship might break up. They might get in a fight, lose it, relationship ended all of a sudden because they lost. It's like, man, this person I hooked up with so I can feel more secure and protected, they end up losing. They got that behind, but I need somebody else that's a little bit stronger. Next, uh, they themselves, they might be 2'5" or something, and might not be able to protect themselves very much at all, but they're judging. But that creates even more of the need for them to want oftentimes somebody that might be stronger in that particular area. So this is labor and defense. They value a lot of people with a lot of physical skills, right? Physical labor, strength, and stuff like that, especially historically, as it's concerned. So if you strip away the technologies and even the pew pews and that type of technology, but you just get to the bare basic tools of humanity that persisted through much of human history. Um, you know, the people who tended to dominate and run societies were the ones that were the strongest, right? You had to be the biggest, toughest, baddest bully or whatever, and nobody wanted to mess with, and you got your way. And those were the alphas, so to speak. And so they kind of ran things, and so therefore, because they tended to be able to spread their offspring quite a bit, there's a lot of us that have there's a lot of genes passed down through the ages that attract folks to that type of personality. And that type of personality may not necessarily be as popular today, right? Being a bully and being tough and all this other stuff, hey, that's going to get you kicked out of school, right? That's you'll probably not be doing too good in school, might not be doing good academically, so that might lose opportunities here and there. May even spend some stints in jail and all this other stuff. And so therefore, as society changes, you have people in these different groups, and I mentioned this last time, that may increase in status or decrease in status as people perceive more and less value out of these different parts. At the end of the day, you can hold the perspective that everybody should be valued equal and all that other stuff, but in reality, people don't value everybody equal. So I'm just talking about how movements have happened over time. So what is versus what should be, two different things. All right, but that's labor and defense. So athletes, for example, in sports, those are people that are because of their physical prowess, those things are valued. Now today, we tend to look at it a little bit differently. The famous athletes and all this other stuff that tend to be very successful, very attractive to the opposite sex, and liked and all this stuff, beloved and sought after with a high intensity to the point they have groupies and stuff. That's something that's well, first of all, let's talk about the history of sports in and of itself. It's really connected to warfare. When you think about the knights and King Arthur round table, all that type of stuff, the different jousting and different type of games that used to go on, those were connected to warfare. These people that were more athletic and be able to you can think of sports as kind of like a warfare simulation to a certain extent, is where it grew out of. And so the people that were most adept at being able to do those types of things, athletic and all this stuff, these were some of the strongest prize fighters and all this stuff. So when it came time for battle, these people were kind of the leaders of that type of things, the Hercules type of person or whatever, so to speak. And so they were highly valued for that, of course, and being able to, and human history has been filled with a lot of warfare and travel feuds and stuff like that. And so these people had a lot of it, clout for obvious reasons, for those particular reasons. Of course, you can put folks on the battlefield for just being criminals or prisoners and different things like that and force them into fighting for you as being expenditure roles. But there's also a value to folks who are strong and all this other stuff. And that still continues to this day, even as we see that value in sports. But also a lot of people draw the connections and parallels with how there's this tribalism, for example. We see that showing up in our politics and different areas of society, our groupism and all this other stuff. And so how we all divide into our corners and have our even in our sports, we expect people to have loyalty, kind of like countries have loyalty, in battle and stuff. You don't want somebody who's going to sell out, so to speak, and be treasonous and different things like that. Well, those same type of terminologies used in sports when somebody switches to another team that we don't like how they did that and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things. They have the battle chants and waving flags and people dressing up and chanting at the games and all this sort of stuff. The same way people would chant for battle and stuff and get behind their country on the battlefield and all this stuff. So they all are tied together in that long history. We've evolved as people and passed on genes all down and that have to do with all that wonderful stuff. And so it explains why we act the way we do around sports. But again, you think of it as more of assimilation connection to the warfare past history that it was usually be connected to. But an assimilation because obviously you don't want to kill off all your people or whatever in doing these different things. But this practice gives you the opportunity to be sharper and stronger by the time you actually go out to do the real thing. So it actually served a positive value to society. Now, our athletes aren't necessarily the people we're putting on the forefront line in today's society, but again, just understanding the history of what's going on there. All right, so with that said, even in that, when it comes to our emotional connection, even the defense folks, right? When you're out on the front line, so to speak, in battle, you can't be. You got to have courage. What is courage? Well, courage is not the absence of fear. You can talk to anybody courageous, and they'll tell you that it's not that you don't have fear. Everybody has fear. It's just that even though I have fear, I don't follow it. I don't allow that to be a barometer that guides me, basically. So again, you're kind of disconnected from your emotions to be able to move in that way to where it doesn't slow you down, it doesn't impact you, and I'm still able to perform the way I need to perform. Right, a lot of athletes, they got little different things that they do where they say they got ice in their veins and stuff like that. It's because they can take that last second shot in the fourth quarter type of thing. Again, these are not people that don't have emotions. It's because they are so focused, they're able to turn off their emotions. The emotions end up being enemies. If they start worrying and getting into all the emotion stuff, they're not even going to be as successful and be able to go as far in this discipline of labor and defense as they would if they didn't. And so when people look at these folks and wonder why they're so emotionally disconnected and all this sort of stuff, this is what they have to be in order to provide the value to society that you actually want them to provide value for. So if you have a high standard of wanting them to bring so much labor to bring all this money and have so much of defense value to be able to defend you in case something go down, you have to also be able to appreciate what comes with that. So just like with essentialists, for example, what might come with that in terms of the anxiety that might come with their environment not being the right way, and they have to do all the different things to get it right. It's like, get the smells right, light some different candles and everything, do whatever they need to do, get the ambiance, the lighting, all this other stuff. Every 6 months, you're moving some furniture around because you need to get it to the way that's gonna make you feel renewed and refreshed and everything. Just realize not everybody has that same instinct. A lot of folks can put their furniture in one place and ride that out for 20 years before they even care about moving something. All right, unless they're looking for something, they need to move it out the way and they realize it's dirty and they clean underneath in the meantime and then put it back. But it's nothing about moving the things itself. So we're all different people. You got to appreciate all the things that come with it, even with the perceptionist. You got to appreciate that there are things that the perceptionist does that draws us to them. Again, like I said last time, there are people who will go on dates with folks and be like, hey, there was no vibe, there was no connection, there was no energy there. Most likely that person was not delving very deeply into the perceptionist arts. If that happened, if they were delving deep into the perceptionist arts, they'd be smooth enough with it and they'd know how to say the right words off their lips. They'd have the cleverness of their tongue. These are things that are practiced. You don't come out the womb knowing how to do this stuff. So they have, a lot of times they have a lot of experience dealing with people. Extroverts might be a little bit more stronger in this area than introverted folks are. Some people on the spectrum may struggle with this if they don't pick up on the social skills quite as good. But these perceptionists provide a certain type of value to society that a lot of folks gravitate to and like, whether they like to admit it or not. And we value these folks for that. And if they don't have it, it's like, hey, you're a good person, nothing wrong with you and everything. You're a nice person, kind person, all this. But I'm just going, we can be friends, but I just can't move you out of that category for some reason. And both men and women do it. So those are things we have to face that reality that, of how much we put value into that. And so they also provide value to us too. We got to appreciate all that comes with that. Because, yeah. All right. So that with that said, let me see. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything that I want to add to that. Let's see. Also, one thing I will add to it. So just like the next first column, you have the emotion based things. I said that the emotions get amplified when you got more and more people that are collaborating on their emotions. They're sharing their emotions, right? Allows those opportunities to have that empathy and sympathy and everything, and it just brings it up through the roof and amplifies it so much higher. So it's something that's highly valued in and of its own self. So a lot of people bond together for the purpose of bonding in and of itself, right? The feelings that come from that. Um, on the other side, when laborists combine and collaborate with those, they're not trying to bond necessarily for the emotion and purpose of bonding in and of itself. They rarely do it for that purpose alone. They really are more task oriented. They're towards a goal. So maybe we can defend ourselves a lot better if we work together, right? And this is where armies and stuff come together. And that's at the largest scale, of course, of the whole country. But but you can also have your crew of people that you hang out with when you go out and about in case something popped up. We got each other back. That's a smaller level of how that works together. But there's power in numbers, and so it's towards a certain purpose for the defense, even in the labor, right? I mean, these days, what blows my mind is how many people say that everybody and their mama got to be a CEO. I mean, everybody can't be a CEO of their own company because then where are all the workers? Nobody's workers, right? And if you don't collaborate together and have workers that are working on a project, you can't build the skyscraper. You can't build our sewer systems. You can't build our transportation highways and trains and all the airplanes and all the stuff that we have there. It requires groups of people, and so that collaboration amplifies our ability to impact the environment in this physical way that's shown in that column, right? And a lot of times these labor folks are valued for their physical labor because they can manipulate the environment to create the outcomes and things. They can build a deck or patio or fix this, that, or the other, which is valuable for a sensual, because they often want to be able to have the environment a certain way. Maybe they might not be capable of doing it on their own, but if they partner up and pair up with somebody that's a laborist, that person might be able to help them to get what they need or something like that. If so, as people focus on their arts, I can focus on what I specialize in, so I can become great at it. And because you value it a whole bunch, you can focus on what you specialize in, become great at it because I value it so much, and it becomes we mutually meet each other's needs. And so that's where your equality comes in. The equality is not so much of, hey, we split everything 50-50 down the bottom line, because sometimes if you only go half in on something, you never become that good at it. You have to go all in or all out. So a lot of times people master in certain areas more so than others, just so they can, and again, it doesn't have to be 100%, but they can spend, I don't know, 80% or something like that. They might delve down highly in one area more so than the others in order to be highly effective in there and provide extremely high value in that area. And it brings reward and benefits. A lot more people are attracted to you and different things like that. All right. So that's that. Also, the intellectual. So I talked about how the labor and defense folks, they're emotionally cut off in a lot of ways, but the intellectual, it may not be clear to a lot of people, but the intellectual, if he wants to be effective in what he does or she does, right, they're going to have to be emotionally disconnected in order to be very effective, at least when they're performing their arts. They don't have to always do it. Some people can flick the switch and turn it on and off better than others and compartmentalize, but a lot of times the intellectual is also going to be emotionally disconnected in order to be effective, because in my definition of an intellectual, this is a person that values the truth. All right. Their purpose and goal is they want to obtain wisdom, truth, knowledge, and understanding of life in the universe via studying, using logic, observation, experimentation, and analysis. All right. So those are the things that they're delving in. So that's my definition of it. If you have some different definition that you're going by, throw it out the door. I'm not talking about that. Not saying that it's not useful. It's just not what I'm talking about in this conversation. All right. So yeah. so the intellectual cares about what's the actual truth. And in order to be able to get down to the bottom of what the truth is, you got to put your own biases aside. We talk about how, biases can throw us off base, right? And your emotions are biased. How I feel about something often impacts whether I want certain things to be true more so than others. If I have a certain ideology, whether it's, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, all this other different things like that, you tell me a certain thing that doesn't fit with the ideology that I love, whether it's, it could be, red pill feminism, all this other stuff. If it doesn't fit with my ideology as perfectly as I need it to, to give me the warm and peace and whatever I want with that, a lot of times people are very defensive. They can get very negative, call you for even suggesting the thing and all this other stuff, right? And so if you're going to be a true intellectual, you have to be willing to put that to the side to be able to value what the truth is about things in the first place. And not everybody's good at that, right? So an intellectual, let's say if we talk about like the STEM fields, right? Science and math and engineering, all these different things that bring us the next technologies, that allow our computers or phones that we might be watching this on to even work, right? We had to figure out some truth about some stuff in order for these devices to advance to where it is, right? So people had to be able to put aside how they feel about some stuff, because how they feel about something ain't gonna make this computer work. It's not gonna make this phone work, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot we have to understand about how things work in order to be able to get the great things and technologies that we have in life. So these folks do provide value to us, right? Knowing the truth about things can be important because they can give wise counsel to a lot of folks to make their lives better in a lot of different ways. You know, even a perceptionist who might be a good politician or something like that, because I can wear a suit or a dress very well, and I can get the results that I want out of folks because I put forth the right image. However, I might not know all the answers, so I might have to seek some counsel from an intellectual to be able to help supplement in those lot of areas. Be able to tell me some talking points that might to get to the right things and so on and so forth. So intellectuals are valuable all across the board. Even the laborists and defense folks, not all of them are intellectuals, and so therefore, they need to. A lot of folks say work harder, no, work smarter, not harder, type of thing. So how do I make my work more effective so I'm not burning myself out? If I can get the same results without having to work quite as hard because I'm working smarter, then all of a sudden I can have the same impact without having to break my back in order to do it, right? Sweating and go through as much sacrifice, and it has to burn me out the same way. Those type of thing. Or defense, if I can use the intellect to be able to create better weapons, better strategy, to attack at the right time and place, and so on and so forth, I can be more effective in being able to keep everybody safe, and so on and so forth. So intellect, there's a value that comes across from all the different categories that comes from intellect. But again, they have to sacrifice their emotions to be effective. And me, I'm a mathematics professor and everything, so I've had a lot of students. There's a lot of math anxiety, for example. So again, your feelings of anxiety, your test anxiety. There's a lot of studying and stuff that talk about how that might impact your ability to even be able to perform well in the test. To get the right answers the way you need to, and so on and so forth. So again, there's the emotions that if you're not as able to disconnect yourself from those things, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to perform hard in these domains. I'll have students that'll do problems perfectly exactly right, follow all those steps and understand it quite right or whatever, get the answer, and then because their answer's a fraction, all of a sudden they'll be like, it's not supposed to be a fraction, is it? And they just erase it and throw it away and try to do something totally different and don't trust it anymore, even though the logic was right, the process was right. They'll throw that out the door because they don't feel good about the answer at the end. So there's different things like that, that it doesn't look like an answer that I would want it to be in. So therefore, I throw it away or whatever. So an intellectualist satisfies those, sacrifices those things. Some of the qualities about intellectuals, they're often deeply lost in thought. You might have them kind of off in the zone, so to speak, a lot of times. And so they're actually sacrificing the present. We talk about emotions keep you locked in the present. Sometimes they're sacrificing the present because you need to be, thinking about things. You got to process things. You got to, to try to make sense out of what's going on. You have to. It takes time to be able to do that. Um, and also, when it comes to these people, explaining how to do something is not as satisfying as explaining the why. So if you just say, "Here, this is how you do it," like, no, don't just tell me how. Explain me why I got to do it this way. These are the type of people that do that, because there's really not everybody who cares about the why. Trust me, I know that as a math teacher. Not everybody cares about the why. They just like, look, I just need to know how to do it so I can get the right answer, so I can get the C, I can pass this class with at least a C or something like that. Some people do not care about the why whatsoever. They just want to be able to do. Just tell me what to do. I don't want to think about it. I want to turn my brain off and just be on autopilot. Just tell me what to do. And so if that's you, you're probably not an intellectual. And so you got intellectuals are usually flexing those because the brain is a muscle. You got to flex it and practice it all the time in order for it to get stronger. So they're always flexing the muscles, be able to do those things. Let's see. I'm reading the comments here. Kim said, "It's really nice if you're able to stay in the present moment at your job. Many people can't. They live by the calendar." Yeah. So you got to be able to focus on your job, right? And I think that you got your job and then you got your home and other life, right? And a lot of times at work, a lot of folks' jobs may not require their emotions to necessarily be fully strong at work, right? But there's a lot of emotions connected to their home life and other things going on in life and so on and so forth. And so those can leak over into the other if the person can't compartmentalize it. So all those things can go down. Let me go back and check through some of these messages. I missed quite a few of them. Let's see. That's been me, naive. I tend to be blind to manipulators, and that's perfectly fine. I think everybody's been played the fool, right? Everybody. There's no exceptions to the rule. There's even a song that says it. Everybody plays a fool. Listen, baby. No exception to the rule. All right. Anyways, yeah, singing wasn't my thing. It used to be. I used to have a better voice back in the day, but not so much now. But we all, fall for that manipulation and everything. And it's because again, think of yourself as, if somebody strikes the right tune with you, it's going to vibrate you and open it up. Well, let's put it like this, put it this way. When when somebody emotionally strikes your chords the right way, again, when people say that they're with somebody and they're vibing, they're connecting, they're feeling the chemistry, the energy and everything, when you are feeling the feelings the way that you need to feel those feelings, especially when it comes to relationships, you become more trusting. You become more trusting. You trust that person because they're able to do those things for you. Suddenly, you trust that they have qualities that they have not even demonstrated. They don't. Sometimes we feel like the person lied to us and deceived us, and they might not even lie to us at all, or told us something wrong at all. They just hit all the right notes the right way, and we suddenly believe all this greatness about them. So, for example, a lot of men are very visual in their attraction. So they see a lot of women that looks attractive, and when they see that beautiful woman walk in the room, it's kind of like, oh, and it's like heaven. The doors open up. It's like, wow, she's beautiful, she's perfect, she's everything pure and holy, and all this. It's like, whoa, this woman didn't tell you that she is pure and holy and all this other stuff, did she? No, she didn't. You just all of a sudden felt a certain way, visually stimulated a certain way, the way she just walked and moved her body and carried things and had the right dimples and smiled the cute ways at the right times and had the right mannerisms and all that stuff and carried herself like a lady. Again, all the right social cues that struck you the way that it needed to strike you, in order to make you feel the way you needed to feel. All right. And that made you trusting. That made you put certain qualities on that person that they may or may not have possessed. It might be justified, it might not. But that's why early in relationships, everybody's kind of where they're, it's like coming into an interview. You're trying to put your best foot forward. You got to kind of match with the person's fantasy to a certain extent, because they're going to put some qualities on you that may not even necessarily match up, right? And so a lot of folks are trying to meet up to that, not do the wrong thing. And I mean, I saw a video where a girl said that, hey, if she goes on a date with a guy and he ordered at a fancy restaurant and he orders a Coke to drink, then I'm just done. I'm out of the date. How you gonna order a Coke at a fancy restaurant? Why do you do? Who does that? You know. So if you got standards like that to where somebody has to be this perfect person, I don't know how drinking Coke is imperfect, but you have some ideal inside your head of somebody that they have to even do all the social mannerisms perfectly to strike the right chords with you, to the point to where even if they drink a Coke, that might be a turnoff for you, or take you to the wrong type of restaurant or whatever it ends up being. That they, if they're not an expert on the social skills, and that it takes practice for people to get to that. You got to deal with experienced people. You can't deal with novices and expect people to be experts in hitting those notes the right way. So we're actually calling for perceptionists a lot of times by some of the standards that we require out of folks. But once they hit all those notes for us, it's like, okay, it's hitting all the right signs. They made it through all my booby traps. This must mean that this person's meant for me. This must be the one, and I'm just gonna allow a lot of folks in, and allow this person in. Because a lot of times, especially if you're getting a lot of attention, there's a lot of women that, once again, I've mentioned before, once you go through puberty, start developing and all this stuff, you're getting attention from the opposite sex and so on and so forth, especially with social media, getting all this stuff in the BMs. It might not be quality attention, you may not want it all, but it's attention nonetheless. And so a lot of times for some folks, it may be hard to keep up with that level of attention. You got to find some ways to just whittle down the list. And so that's why you start making up some random stuff like, man, if you drink Coke when we out, nah, I ain't dealing with you. You just need some reasons to cut the list in half. And those reasons, these artificial reasons, it turns out that, a lot of people share notes with each other. If he doesn't give you the last piece of chicken, that means he doesn't love you. Uh, a lot of people share notes with each other, and it's like, oh, I hear that if you let them go, and if they don't come back, and all this other stuff. So we follow all these different riddles through life, and so people, since a lot of folks are doing the same things, they're having the same tests, they're talking with each other, they're sharing notes with each other, and they're doing the same tests and expecting some of the same results out of their people. And so the opposite sex learns these tests. They learn these social cues, and they learn how to master them. And so they know how to do what they need to do in order to get what they want out of folks. And that's just the nature of how things tend to play out a lot of times. So if we make sure that whatever test that we establish for folks, if we have to even establish tests at all, depends, that those tests actually narrow things down on a more meaningful basis, not just more arbitrary and just say, well, if I set some arbitrary thing and this is kind of really arbitrary, so not everybody's going to meet this, and so therefore if somebody does, then this is a sign from the heavens, so to speak, or whatever, that person's meant to me or me. Are you sure that that's necessarily how it works, or is that just something that you made up? So make sure you at least have some standards first and foremost that actually narrow things down, not for people to have good manipulative skills, because they've been through an interview process with a lot of different people of the opposite sex, and so they've played so many people in their life that they've mastered it, right? That those people aren't the only ones that can get through. You have to make sure that you set up real, more authentic test, so to speak, if that's what you want to do. Now, I don't like the idea of test because I think life is hard enough in and of its own right there. Sometimes people are trying to be able to find somebody that they can relax with, that they can enjoy and have peace with, because let's say if you're a labor and defense person, that life can be stressful and hard, right? It's a lot of fear and things that you're dealing with and stuff. And so you may be looking, the reason why you're coming to the other side is that you want that to be your outlet, right? That refills your energy so that you can go back and fight another day at work or fight on the battlefield or whatever you need to be. But if that's just another test that you have to be on your P's and Q's about and make sure that you don't fail and all this other stuff, then that's just another thing that adds stress on top of the already stressful day you have, right? And so on and so forth. So I'm not a big fan of all like tests, so to speak. I think life is hard enough itself, but if you want to test, life is hard enough. It provides its own test. If you get with somebody long enough, talk to them long enough, ask enough questions just to get to know them, and just watch and observe and how they behave when certain life challenges come to them. Do they crumble or do they pass those tests? That'll tell you what you need to know right there. I don't think you need to add a whole lot of extra stuff to it. But I mean, I understand if you're in a hurry and you're trying to weed through 5 million clients in your DMs or something like that. you may not have as much patience as you might want be able to exercise. But again, we just have to make sure whatever system we do set up that they're meeting our interests and filtering by the right criteria. All right. All right, all right, all right. Life is hard enough. I agree. So, uh, all right. So, with that said, let me go ahead and move continue on with the my discussion. I was talking about the intellects. So they're often lost in thought a lot. They're often more concerned with the why more so than the how, because they have to understand things. It's not good enough. It has to fit into the web and framework they have in their mind of everything. These are people who have sacrificed a lot of time examining their belief sets, because uh, early on in our lives, we're all susceptible to believing a whole lot of false things, right? Whether it's about believing in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy or whatever it is, right? A lot of stuff can be pumped into our heads by society. I'm just going to use those more benign examples, but there's a lot of stuff that a lot of folks think are true, and even some adults to this day still think are true that are totally false. A lot of society puts a lot of false things in our heads, and you become an adult, and by the time you become adult, you really are responsible for re-examining those things and excavating some of those beliefs, get rid of them and replace them with correct things. An intellectual, they go through this work. They go through it every day. They're examining everything that they do, everything that they think, and everything that they believe every day, and it takes years and years and years of very mindful attention to this, to a point where other folks would not even want to put in half, no, not even a fraction of the energy that they put into this process, because they're so intent on wanting to get it right. And you can't hold people responsible for what they're learning when they're a child and everything, because you're a child. You don't know no better. Whatever your parents, the people that you trust, taught you, you're by default. All of us start off just say we're gonna believe in the people that we trust. So if our parents were loving and those were the people that raised us and fed us and all that other stuff, it behooves our best interest to just listen to whatever they say, and whatever they explain to us is probably right, and and just go with it from there. But of course, our parents, they're not perfect. They may be wrong about a lot of other stuff, and so on and so forth. So we have to learn how to undo some stuff, right? Sometimes and whether people intentionally, and it's not just our parents, but society as a whole teaches a lot of stuff. We get socialized. The process of socialization, for example, um, all of us know that kids can be brutally honest sometimes, right? They can tell the exact truth right out of their mouth, and in ways that us adults are not willing or able to do it, because we've been socialized out of telling the truth sometimes. So we can actually socialize the truth out of folks to where folks don't even know what the truth is anymore. A lot of adults don't, and it wakes us up, and it's shocking when we hear a child say something that's truthful, and we actually teach them, no, don't say that, because it's not acceptable, right? Because again, if you're thinking more in the emotional columns of things, for the personal experience, saying certain things, even if it is true, may not be popular. It may rub people the wrong way and make people feel certain types of way. But kids can be brutally honest sometimes, and they're not trying to hurt nobody's feelings. They're just saying exactly uh, what they see and calling it like it is. But we socialize folks to be like, hey, I talked about how the in the emotional in that column, emotions are big, and so therefore you have different values. So a lot of times you prioritize nurture, care, no harm, basically, as kind of the highest ultimate good, basically. And so even if it is the truth, sometimes we don't say it because that's just mean. All right. And so here's the thing, that what happens with the intellectual. The intellectual, they come upon some truths, and those truths can be truths. Once they see those truths, they can't unsee them. It's like it's obviously true, but if they come back to the rest of society and tell the rest of society this truths, the rest of society will turn them into the enemy. Will say that they're a bad person. They call them every name in the book, whatever the names you got, every bigot, every racist, every sexist, every misogynist, every whatever you want to come up with, they're gonna call them all those names. Anti-Semite, whatever it ends up being, every name is gonna be thrown at them in the book. Uh, if they were to say the truths that they came out with. And so a lot of folks, just intellectuals, they may know the truth for themselves and use whatever they can to benefit for themselves. They can watch other folks fall prey to not knowing falsehoods and seeing pain and destruction in life, and they may want to help, but they don't even know how to help. A lot of times, they don't know how to say it without. And the few times that they do try to say it, it always bites them back, and the people don't accept it anyways. And so a lot of folks just fall back into silence. And this is where. To a certain extent, you can have some cancel culture. Now, I don't want to make this very clear. Not everybody who screams cancel culture is an intellectual. Please believe that. I would say a small fraction of them actually are. So I do want to throw that caveat on there. I don't want anybody get any bad ideas or think that. But there is a degree to cancel culture that comes out of there. We've known scientists that, if you try to come up with new science that says that, hey, it's not that everything revolves around the earth, but we're actually revolving around the sun. All of a sudden that could be heresy, and that could be something that could cost you your life, or get you crucified or something, right? So, and it's not just him; it's plenty of other scientists that had to face these different tests and challenges to see whether or not society is well. And I would say some of the brightest people of all societies and times, they're gonna have some beliefs that they may not be able to say simply because people who think they're open, they're not nearly as open as they think they are. And that's because, uh, for the highest truth for an intellectual is not how you feel. You have to actually disregard feelings and be willing to to entertain and truly allow all possible beliefs to come in and give them an equal seat at the table and sort through them through the same rules of logic. All of you guys have to pass the rule of logic. I'm not going to say just the ones that I like and be like, oh, those are too dark and scary looking, so I'm not going to test those. I got to be willing to let all of them have a fair seat at the table and see which ones line up and meet line up with reason. It doesn't contradict itself, and everything seems logical and comes through. So if you do that, every once in a while, you're gonna walk terribly close to some stuff, and it might not be exactly equal to it, but if you even walk a little bit close to something that other folks don't like, even though it's only maybe in a slight small degree, but you have a lot of other nuances and caveats that explain why you're not exactly in that dark corner with the other thing. A lot of folks are pretty black and white. They don't know how to have that nuance, and so they're gonna throw you those same labels and stuff too. So intellectual may seem alone a lot of times too. Just like a laborer who may not feel like, may feel like people want him just or her just because of what they produce, the money that they make and stuff. So it's disconnected from the individual themselves. The intellectual may feel like I have all this stuff going on within me, but I can't let it all out. Number one, half the time, you have to have somebody who can keep up with your conversation. Can how much do you have to give them in order to get them up to speed to be able to even have the conversation that you want to have? All right, there's a small group of people that you're even able to talk to. So that kind of isolates you from the things that you're actually truly passionate about in key ways. And so you're not able to even get the type of emotional connection that you really want a lot of times. If you have it as a requirement that the person that you date has to have those qualities, you probably might be a lonely person, because it's going to be hard for that person. If they can connect with you intellectually on that level, that's cool and dandy, that's a great thing. But also, there's other things that you're looking for too, because it's not just about somebody having the exact same qualities as you. A lot of times it's complementing qualities. So you might want them to also have some of the other things as well. And if you want them to, if you've disconnected from your emotions in order to be able to access these truths the way you need to, then a lot of times you're trying to look to reconnect to those emotions. All right. And so this gets me back to what I was talking about with some of the value that the personal experience folks have. They provide to some of the global experience folks, because the global experience folks have the disconnect from their emotions a lot of times. They're often looking to reconnect with their emotions in a lot of different ways. So That person who's been off on the battlefield for months and years and had to turn their emotions off, when they come home, and they are often in tears and emotions flood out. This is how they reconnect with the stuff that matters to them. And so it's through everybody else that all of a sudden they're able to reconnect and life has its meaning. And if they don't have that value to come home to, if there's nothing there of value that's going on right at home, you crushed their whole life is crushed because they spend so much of it in the dark that now they don't have anything but dark. It's lights out at that point. And so for a lot of these folks, when relationships start becoming more scant, you don't have as many relationships are available for these types of folks. It's not people don't value what they have to offer. They're struggling in society in different ways. When you go through different transitions through society like that, certain types of jobs are no longer what the basis of the economy are. So now the economy is valuing other types of skill, more of a service economy. So the same types of physical labor might not be valued the same way. Those type of things have impacts on these people. All right. So let me see. Read this comment. The emotional connection you want, that gets harder to compromise about as time goes on. Absolutely. Yeah. So emotional connection is important. That's really the key, one of the key bases of all relationships. So thank you for that. All right. So yeah, all of that, they want to connect back to it. The intellectualists, they've done all this sacrifice and emotion, and they want to connect back to it too. And I say another thing about the intellectual. Um, the more you know, a lot of times the less magic there is in life. It's kind of like I said with the Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, not the Easter Bunny, but Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, and the what I say the Tooth Fairy, right? Once you know it's not real, next time you see a dollar under your pillow and you know who put it there, it's not the same. Don't get me wrong, we still appreciate money, but it feels the same way as when you just slap me $5 in my hand, versus just putting it under my pillows. There's no extra magic. There was extra magic to that $5 before, and it's not there no more. So it's not the same. So sometimes once you know the magician's trick, right? It's not, oh my gosh, that is amazing. How did you do that? It was a beautiful show. If you don't know how the magician did it, but if you know all the sleights of hands, all the tricks that make it look like that something happened, but it really didn't, everything behind it, it's not as amusing the same. That's not the same show as it was when you didn't know how they were doing it. All right. And the same thing's true about, I talk about these more benign areas, but it's a true about everything in life, including even in relationships. When it comes to, again, the perception is using all the social cues and things like that try to turn on your arousal and different things like that. Don't get me wrong. We all still have our sexual arousal and things that our genes have wired us to, become turned on and aroused by, in order to make it more likely for us to reproduce. Because as I talked about earlier, we're more likely to trust people, and we're starting to feel in this ways, and we open up. We realize that we have to switch between two different states. We're either in like a you know we're either in a exploration and discovery mode, where we're willing to explore new things and take on new opportunities, or we're in a kind of a fear and protection type mode, stay away from strangers type of thing. So when do I go out and take on this potential opportunity of this random stranger, or do I fear from it, right? And that's the same thing when you're going out on a date with somebody. How do I switch from being fearful of this person that I don't know to all of a sudden I'm going back to their house, or taking them back to my place, and all of a sudden we're doing the do on the first date? How does that magically happen when naturally I'm usually a defensive person? How do those things get turned off? You have to understand that nature has designed it to where when certain cues are triggered, that thing turns off, and all of a sudden you're doing stuff that you wouldn't normally do, because that person was able to hit those right cues the way that it needs to be hit. But again, going back to what I was saying about the intellectualist, once you're an intellectualist, you understand how it works to a certain extent. Some of the magic that made some of that stuff special, it may lose some of that magic. And so that's what the intellectuals kind of sacrifice us to a certain extent, because when they understand how the tricks are done, when they understand how everything works, when they understand this, that, and the other, uh, it's not as glamorous as it used to be. So it doesn't have the same impact. And so, to address what Kim was saying, you actually end up becoming less susceptible to the manipulation because you see it coming from a mile away, at a certain point. And so, I mean, there's pros and cons to that. I mean, all of us want to be able to feel the magic of, I don't know, opening up a present that, we think back that we opened that present that said Santa underneath the tree. How we felt in on that day, we'd like to recreate that moment, right? That was something magical. Sometimes these people cannot, it struggles to reconnect. They got to get on the roller coaster, they got to skydive and do some off the wall stuff, right, in order to be able to do it. And speaking of skydiving, doing off the wall stuff, you may find that some of these labor and defense as well as intellectuals, they do some risky behaviors that you don't understand. It's like, why would you do that? That's so, that's not, that's so this, that, I don't want to say the words and get get in Facebook jail or anything, but you know people are criticized it that way. It's like, hey, see, this is why people have a certain lower lifespan and so on and so forth, right? So uh a lot of times with the risk comes the reward, right? If you're going to stick out in these categories, there's no risk there. If no there's no risk, there's no reward at the end of the day. So there's, in this discipline over here, risk is valued in ways that is not as valued in the other two domains we talked about yesterday. So that's part of the reason why I broke it down this way. And so if you're gonna taking that risk, all of a sudden gets you more opportunities. You stick out. Everybody else did the safe bet. You took the risk and took the less probable bet, and all of a sudden it paid off one day. And now all of a sudden your life's changed. You're able to get more opportunities with people of the opposite sex. You're more people are able to trust you and be like, hey, when everybody else was thinking this, I was the one that had the intuition and the smarts and goods. You can play the perceptionist to a certain, because it might have been just pure luck, or even just a clock being right 2 times a day, and so all of a sudden you was just luckily lucky that one time, whatever it ends up being. But people play on that and be like, hey, trust and believe in me and invest in me, give me your money, that type of thing. And people use that to their benefit because they like to look like they're an intellectual or have these intuition, these sort of more of a sensual type skills, for example, to be able to figure stuff out when really that might not have nothing to do with it. They'll say that, hey, I'm a self-made person, when really they inherited everything they got, type of thing, so that they want to get more gravitas in one or more of these disciplines than they really truly have when they just might be doing more of the perceptionist work. From a negative perspective, again, there's positive and negative. A lot of perceptionist work is done with consent. So I want to make sure that is very clear. That a lot of folks want that to happen in a lot of ways. So, and we all operate in it. So don't look down totally on other folks, because we definitely know some people that spend a lot of time all in perception in a negative light. But I want to make sure that there's just some people that walk, it's all about their vibe and energy and all this other stuff, and they walk a certain way, and people are attracted to that too. And so that's they learn how to do these things by watching the cues of society, and that brings the rewards. And so and they're not doing it in a malicious way at all either. So there's a lot of different people that fall in these categories, and they use it in good ways and not so bad ways as well too. So whereas there's other folks that, hey, you put them in some high heels and they're walking like a baby deer or something, stumbling over their feet and stuff like that, right? Those social things, they haven't put practice into it. They're not paying attention to the cues. They're not walking with the swagger, and all this other stuff as well too. So they don't say the right things at the right time and have the right words and then quick with it and all that. So different people pay attention to different arts and different things, and we value those things in different ways. So all right, so let's see. With that said, so that's our labor and defense, that's our and as well as our intellect. Let me go ahead and talk about some of the pros and cons, because I haven't done that yet, so let me do that. So as far as the labor and defense, some of the positives, right? They're critical for life necessities and luxuries. We talked about that. The protection and safety. You get a competitive advantage. There's often a competitive element that falls in this column as well that doesn't fall as much in the other columns. It's not about competing as much as it is over here, because when it comes to force, whoever has the most force can annihilate and get rid of the other one. It might be a part of survival, so you have to be able to compete. This is where hierarchy comes into play a lot of times. You want to be able to measure and rank things and stuff and make sure that you know how well you're achieving and meeting metrics and stuff, because otherwise if somebody's at a higher metric than you, you're at a disadvantage, and that can mean the difference between whether you continue to survive or not, right? So whether it's in terms of acquiring goods or being able to defeat an enemy, right? We're competing for resources on this earth. As much as we like to think they're infinite, they're not. They're finite, and so there's a lot of competitive advantage that has to play in here, and they have to view the world through that lens. And so, as much as maybe the sensualists or perceptionists might not want them to do rankings and measuring and all this other stuff and think about things a certain way, they're not going to be successful in what they do unless they do these types of things. Uh, but anyways, but because they are competitive, they can get that advantage and put you in a secure place. All right. So that's positive. Ability to shape the environment and eliminate your threats, and then also being resourceful to be able to build or fix things. So some of the negatives, without your morality of ethics, it can be a violently cruel world, right? And then also an obsession with power can lead to physical abuse or bullying. When it comes to the intellectualists, some of the positives, they're good at predicting and problem solving. And when I say predicting, predicting the future, right? A lot of times, if you understand how things go, you can predict how things are going to play out. It's like I've seen this story 5 million times, or not even necessarily seen it from experience, but this makes sense to me. And so if I do this, I can predict these outcomes, and I have a high probability that these outcomes will happen or whatever, right? They can predict things in the future. We can get to the point where we can predict that a solar eclipse is going to happen because of our intellectual ability in that capacity, right? So you can predict the future, as well as I want to talk about predicting the past as well too, because we can see evidence and little bits and pieces of evidence from the past, but a very intellectual person can connect those dots to be able to actually tell a story of what what the past used to be. And how we got to this point right here, right? You look at the Grand Canyon, and all of a sudden it's like, well, has life always been like this? I mean, has the canyon always been like this, or did it used to be something else and it took a while to get to this, right? Being able to see that full story and piece it all together, that's an intellectualist is able to do those types of things. So predicting and problem solving, everybody needs problem solving, right? Intellectualist is good at that. It increases their competency, security, effectiveness, and efficiency, right? All those things are valuable. People want a competent person. People, these are like leadership qualities. People that like good leaders are often an intellectual is able to be a good leader because they understand how things work, right? Especially at a system level. A lot of us can understand things as individual and play our role, in our specific part, but it takes a bigger vision to be able to see the full system of how things interact with one each other. And if you only pay attention to one part and value that more so than the other, then there's ends up being a cost, and the system gets out of balance. Think of like an ecosystem; it can collapse if one thing gets out of whack and you don't keep things checked and balanced in certain ways. So an intellectual appreciates and understands those aspects of entire systems. All right. So people that value those leadership qualities, they're valuing an intellectual quality in that regard. All right. Of course, leaders also have to be good perceptionists too, because they have to inspire people to want to follow them, because it's not good enough to be the smartest person in the room. You also have to be persuasive and motivate people to want to follow you. There's that aspect of it too. So it's a little bit of both that actually goes into an effective leader. So probably the skills that matter the most might be the more intellectual, but again, since you need people to also follow, the perceptionist part has to be there on it too. Let's see. But also they're able to insulate themselves against the manipulation and deception from others, right? So when we talked about that already. So some of the negatives is the smarter you can get, if you're selfish with it, right? You don't have the ethics and morals behind it, then of course you can use that. You can also use that to be manipulative in your own right, to be able to use people for your own interest and try to dominate over folks and things like that. But also negative, it comes at the sacrifice. You can sacrifice being beloved, your beloved and comforting beliefs. There are certain beliefs romantic ideas. You might be a hopeless romantic or whatever. Learning the truth about certain things may force you to give up certain things that you don't want to give up. And so there's certain people that don't have to give them up. They can hold on to that and they can reap the rewards and benefits that come with that to a certain extent. Certain false beliefs, we hold on to false beliefs because they provide benefits. If they didn't provide benefits, we wouldn't hold on to them most likely so strongly. So they serve a purpose. They can be beneficial. Of course, they can also cause a lot of pain on, sometimes it's delayed. It comes later on down on the back end once things collapse apart or whatever. But, they cause benefits on the front end. And so a lot of times, these intellectuals, they sacrifice those things. So a lot of some of the super highs that you see some other folks get to meet, a lot of the intellectualists, they might be more monotone. A lot of times you think about the last nerd geek or whatever you was thinking about, how emotionally roller coastery was that person. They may or may not have been. And also when it comes to intellect, again, some people compartmentalize it. Like when they're in their academics and stuff, maybe if they're dealing with STEM disciplines, they may be able to separate their emotions from it and focus on their and be very effective in that regard. But then when the other domains of their life get tapped into that are more social, involve their personal lives and their wants and dreams and goals and all that sort of stuff, they might be a little bit more emotional, especially in their relationships with other people. And so therefore they might not be as intellectual in those capacities. They might turn on other aspects of themselves. So different people may be more one thing in one environment, more one thing in the other. So when I talk about the intellectual, I'm thinking more general across the board. If you're in all aspects of your life, you apply your intellect to it. And live in that capacity. These are the things that end up happening. All right. So those are the different categories of how that all works out. Now I've been on here for quite a bit of time, more time than I wanted to, but to try to get closer to wrapping things up, uh, I talked about how nurturing, care, and harm are very important on the more emotion based side of things with the personal experience, but also on the globalist global experience type of side of things, where people are more emotionally detached. There are other moral principles that are valued more. So when your emotions are your emotions and relationships, you want to keep those. Things like equality matter a whole lot more because you don't want to. You're not trying to dominate over other. You're trying to value the relationship stuff. You don't want to actually make anybody feel less than or anything like that. So again, equality starts mattering a lot more, and then also not harming anybody, and only showing love and nurturing and care, things like that, making people feel good, positive feelings over negative feelings. That those tend to be the utmost importance. Whereas on the other end of things, and the intellectualists, it's less about the feelings and everything, because again they have to disconnect it. They think that's the enemy of actually what that's gonna stop them from reaching what they want to reach if they allow it into the work that they do. And so therefore it's not necessarily that they I don't know, become some evil beings that desire people to suffer and be tortured or anything. They don't turn into that either. Everybody wants positivity, but they just don't value it as the highest. So that's the way we say it. So they're more important. Growth tends to matter there. So when it comes to intellect, growth matters. At some point, you want to be able to grow in your intellect to be stronger, smarter in that capacity, and sometimes that takes pain. In order to grow, it takes pain. You have to study when nobody else wants to study. You have to be thinking about things when everybody else wants to lay back, chill, relax, and turn their brain off. And so you have to go through pains in order to grow. You have to go through pains in order to get stronger. Lifting weights, you have to tear muscles in order to grow muscles. Your muscles literally tear when you're working out that way, and so on and so forth. So when you're going through labor, you're going through a painful experience. You're doing things that you don't may not feel like wanting to do, but it's through that hard work that all of a sudden the good product comes out on the outside. So you cannot value pain, avoiding pain as the highest thing over on this side of the spectrum. You just simply can't. And so you watch these people on this side and the way that they talk to each other, where they might make fun of each other a lot and joke and do all this. They jokingly make fun of each other, and they seem like they laugh it off. And it's like, wow, these people are weird. They're so backwards. They talk so poorly and call each other names and all this other stuff. What is going on? These people are just weird, what they're doing is they make each other tougher, and they realize that's the nature of what they have to do with each other. This is the way they make each other tougher, and they know it's all in love at the end of the day. And so that's why they can laugh about it too and have fun with it at the same time. But these are the things that build us up, that they have to be able to take these different remarks and not, have that sink them, throw them off base or throw them off focus, or risk the whole relationship all over, these things like that, because the bridges still have to be built. The cell phone still needs to be made. You still have to get to the truth of what's going on in order to be able to solve the problem. In order to make you provide security as an intellect as well, just by understanding more things as well too, just like a laborer or a defense person. So all these things. So there's a different value system. So what type of things do they value then? Well, authority, respect, that's one type of value that tends to be a lot higher, because I talked about how things are more hierarchical. And so you understand where people have put in their work and earned their ranks, and to deserve to be at certain levels. I respect that person's intellect. I respect that person's work ethic, because they're the boss and they run the show. People follow orders to make sure the whole system works and we're more effective as a team and we can get this job done. So authority often matters, and with that authority becomes respect. Certain people you don't question and all this other stuff. And so some of those, people on this side of the spectrum, they may complain about feeling disrespected by folks on the other side of the spectrum, and a lot of times, and other folks that are more emotional based, they may be disrespected in ways that they don't even know. They don't even realize they're being disrespectful, because they don't see the world through the same hierarchical structure. It's not the same thing for them, and so they often blow it off, or in a lot of ways, and they may be ruining and messing up relationships because they don't respect their domain. Both people have to make sure they respect each other's domain, and don't just again be like a bull in the china shop, tearing stuff up in things that you don't know anything about. And so that's part of the reason why I talk about this table, so we can be respectful of each other's space, to be able to be effective in that regard. Also, so in addition to authority and respect, again, loyalty, duty, honor, those things tend to matter a lot in this space, because hey, we need to get the full project completed. You can't just stop when you're halfway done with the building and walk away. That's no good. You can't halfway solve the problem. No, you got to solve the problem. If you only do part of it, the problem's still there. It's just, you might as well have done nothing at that point. So you need people to be dedicated, loyal to and everything, and that duty, and you get honor from that. And if you behave in certain ways dishonorable, that certain people would rather you know uh die on the battlefield than behave with dishonor. That's it. That's the extreme high that you might value thing. But also property is something that also has higher value in this domain as well, because when it comes to creating security, which is what these domains do a lot more of, you got to have a place to rest your head, right? You got to have a place to plow some fields and dig up your food and all this other stuff. So um, at the end of the day, if you don't have any ability to lay claim to that by having more power over somebody else that might want it, or otherwise, uh, then you might not be able to provide your own security. Your own survival might be at risk. And so, since things like that are important, property suddenly tends to have more weight. All right. So that ends up being true. So as I said, pain's not inherently negative. If there's no pain, there's no gain, right? No sacrifice, no growth. Um, and sometimes you can have some of the global experiences, folks. They can look at the personal experiences, folks, as maybe being weak, vulnerable, and out of touch with what it takes to survive and thrive. Just because they don't have the same belief and values. And so part of again, this discussion is, we want to value each other for what we do provide, so that we understand what value we give to each other. I mean, if this is your specialty and you're falling in love and valuing the folks that have a different specialty than you still you can't look down on them just because they're not you. All right. And vice versa. Again, you can't look, if you're one of the personal experience folks, you can't look down at these global experience folks as savages and unemotional and unconnected to their feelings and blah 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 and all this other stuff. looking down your nose at them when again they're doing things that provide value to you as a society, not and as well as in relationships. So at the end of the day, we have to value what makes us all who we are, all the pieces and parts that come with it, so that so that we can work together as teams instead of having the gender wars and the different other types of wars that we have, the identity based wars that we deal with and go through. All right. So, let's see. So they value strength heavily, but they have a sacred sacrifice that they make of disconnecting with their emotions, and they often require the personal experience is reconnected. And think about it this way: let's say if you're a laborer, you work hard for your money, you make that money for your family, you bring it home, so that when your family, is able to open up all those presents under the tree, you're able to you can reconnect with your emotions as you smile and know that what the sacrifice it went through in order to put the smiles on everybody else's faces. When that comes whole circle for you, that reconnects that person to their emotions. So for these people, they need for their labor to be appreciated. They need for the people that they labor on the behalf of to appreciate what they do. And they like to have that opportunity to see the fruits of their labor, to be able to come into fruition that way. So if they're laboring hard, even if they're let's say if this person is sending child support checks to the other parent, but they don't get to spend time with that child for whatever reasons or whatever, that disconnects the whole emotional experience from them in a huge critical way that just devastates that person in ways you can't imagine. So this is how that works out. All right, Kim, I'll holla at you. Just not reading that message. You got to roll out. But uh, but yeah. So those things have a huge impact on a lot of folks. In a lot of ways that people don't fully appreciate it, because a lot of folks will tell these folks, "Hey, you're supposed to do that. That's your job and everything." Blah blah blah. And this is like, whoa, what's going on? And actually, when you look at things from an evolutionary perspective, evolution would only benefits people to do certain behaviors if it uh, if it helps them to be able to survive. You got to be able to stay alive at least long enough to be able to reproduce, right? Get to reproductive age. So you got to be able to survive at least the reproductive age, the longer the better, as well as to be able to have the opportunity to reproduce, right? To be able to have intercourse, basically, or whatever it takes for you to be able to reproduce through your species. That's basically those are the two main things that it comes down to. So survive and be able to be attractive to the other, to the opposite sex or whatever, so that you can reproduce. That's the two things that matter the most. So when it comes to somebody laboring, defending, again, being willing to give their life on behalf of somebody else, put their life at risk and everything, you would, from us, just a direct straightforward, you would think, evolution would not benefit somebody to be willing to risk their lives on somebody else's behalf. But you got to think, so it has to be certain conditions that have to be met in order for that evolution to do that, right? And when you think about like maybe a beehive, for example, there's a lot of bees that will risk their lives and sting folks and have that stinger rip out their guts, and so they don't end up surviving afterwards and stuff like that. So they do things that risk their own lives in order to save the hive and stuff like that, so that the genes from the queen that they came from was able to survive and keep on thriving, right? So there's some, if your relatives, so to speak, can survive, then there might be some benefit there and so on. So there's certain circumstances that evolutionarily it makes sense to be willing to do that, because if the whole hive doesn't survive, then you don't survive a pressure seed on anyway. So there has to be levels where you have to be willing to go all in and do those types of things. But if somebody's willing to, of course, be willing to defend and do all that stuff, you got to be willing to do that in order to be able to reproduce. There's a lot of species where the males might be fighting each other, hitting antlers with each other, and making sure that they show their strength and prowess, and whoever's the strongest one out of them, they get to go off and mate, right? Us human beings aren't too similar. Aren't too dissimilar. As much as we might judge that behavior is looking weird, there's certain aspects of that that's still true for us as human beings. So So I just want you to think about that. That some to a certain extent, being able to be defensive and have that prowess to to be able to do those types of things gives you the opportunity to be able to reproduce. Uh, and I'll as well as you be able to protect your offspring so that they can survive as well to be able to also be able to reproduce and pass your genes on further. All right. So those matter a lot as well. Also, the labor aspects of things. Uh, you know, a lot of these laborers are very generous. They share their resources with the people that they're with. So that the ability to share your resources is not across the board. There's a lot of folks in other categories that are not laborers that would not share a dime. My money is my money, your money is my money type mentalities. I would never pay for this date and all this other type of stuff like this, right? So that generosity that happens there. Number one, that generosity is what allows them to open up again more opportunities to reproduce. So natural selection would not have them be able to work that hard and do all the things that they do um, if it didn't have a reproductive value on the backside of it, right? To be able to reproduce. Uh, of course, they're gonna work hard and labor to be able to feed themselves and put clothes on their own back or whatever. But again, that extra work to help somebody else, they're not gonna just do it for any old random stranger, right? It's usually tied and connected to the people that they're of their family that they value much, or they could do it for other sexual opportunities that they might pursue that might be disconnected if they're doing infidelity or not they're not into monogamy but polygamy or whatever, what I'm saying, so they can seize other reproductive opportunities as well. So it's usually tied to their reproduction is how that's going to happen. And so especially when you start gendering these things and why do men behave certain ways and care about body count and men women and all this. I had talked about this in a previous video, but men paternity often mattered to them, right? Because if again from an evolutionary perspective, a man has to care about his paternity in order for his labor, if he's doing a labor, if that's the role he's generally done, or his defense, if he's not making sure that he's the father of the child, then all that extra work and risk that he put on his back and breaking his back is just for nothing. And evolution would not support that. So we evolution is going to support the genes of pushing down the people that care about whether or not they paternity is theirs. And so any behaviors that are even correlated, doesn't even have to be a cause and effect, but they're just even correlated necessarily with people being less promiscuous. Those are things that guys are going to be more attracted to. uh, and then of course, if a woman is more promiscuous, more likely to doing behaviors that's going to be more associated with somebody who would seize upon an opportunity during their ovulation cycle to sleep with somebody else behind their back, and all of a sudden they're wasting resources taking care of a kid to their 18 or whatever, right? Those types of qualities they're gonna be turned off by. And when I say turned off, don't get it wrong. Men are when it comes to reproduction, they're turned on in the sense of anytime they get the opportunity to pass down their seed, it's a good thing. So if they have a woman body that works, that's fertile and woman and able to go and produce a baby, that opportunity is an opportunity that their body can get them worked up to seize that opportunity, whether they like the person or not, whether they think they have good qualities or whatever. Uh, a man will try to get a one night stand. It doesn't matter in that particular case. He might trick to be able to just for short term to do a one night stand, but he's not going to give up all his resources on a continuous basis on somebody that has the qualities. Probably is not going to be faithful to him long term, and you might end up raising somebody else's kids in the midst of all that. If he sees signs that that's going to happen, he's not going to be as willing to settle down long term. Short term, his body's going to turn him on for that. So that person that maybe that he sees the sexual opportunity because she shows a lot of cleavage. Maybe he associates that. Maybe traditionally in past societies in the past that might have been lightly correlated with that. Then all of a sudden, somebody who's being more sexually open, sexually explicit in different ways and things like that, all of a sudden that's going to turn the guy on to be able to see, hey, that's might be an opportunity I can seize real quick, even though they may not value it for a long-term partner, because if he's going to be doing that sacrifice of his labor and defending and all this other stuff, that's going to be more for somebody that's going to have fidelity to giving her body and her reproductive resources for him and only him. And that's kind of how there's a it worked out for both the one man and the woman. If you look, most scientists believe that women, without going through the full story, that's Jared Diamond. He writes a book about why sex is fun, and it goes through the whole story and explains a whole lot more deeper. So I'm not going to go through it now. But at the end of the day, what scientists believe is that women wanted higher quality men, the best quality men, to be able to commit to them. Of course, the highest quality, best men had a lot of options and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So the only way that so the agreement was basically, look, the only way you're going to be able to lock me down to just be fidelity, have fidelity to you, is if you give me exclusive access to your womb. And so that's where the paired long-term relationships in human beings kind of came from, because it hasn't always been a part of our history. And it's not the part of the history of the vast majority of species on this planet. So it takes certain conditions for it to happen. And I mention this only because a lot of people think that they can behave any old way, do anything they want to do without any type of judgment or risk, and that's going to have impacts on whether or not somebody's willing to go the long run with you. Because all of us I would say the vast majority of us approach relationships in a way where we know we can put people in categories. Okay, this is person that that's Mr. or Mrs. Right now, that I can have a fun time tonight with, but I don't want to keep this person because they ain't gonna be good long term. Versus the person that's gonna be Mr. Right or Mrs. Right that I can keep for a long time, because they have certain qualities and other stuff. This is where those things come out. If you just behave any old way, willy nilly, and think ain't nobody say nothing about you, whatever, it is a free world. You're able to do whatever you want, but of course, there's consequences to it, and you might increase the likelihood that nobody takes you seriously for the long term, if that's what you want. Right? Of course, not everybody has to want long term, and if you don't want long term, then okay, then you're not losing anything. But it's a whole lot easier for a lot of folks to satisfy the conditions for a short term than it is the long term. All right. So with that said, I don't want to get too far off base, and I don't want to. But yeah, I mentioned the shaker sacrifice, that they sacrifice their emotions in that last column for the universals, um, in order to be able to provide the things that they have. We got to value the things too, and they reconnect emotionally in those various ways, and so that's where a lot of the value comes from. People want to have that feeling of life, being alive. And our emotions allow us to be able to do that, and throughout all that sacrifice, they start feeling alive. But at the end of the day, just like anybody else, when they start feeling those feelings and reconnecting that way, they also start feeling more trusting and open and all this other stuff. And so they're also just as vulnerable to getting their hearts broken and all this other stuff. And you run into people like I said before, Shaquille O'Neal say he would never open up emotionally to a woman or something like that, because he's probably had his heart broken in the past, right? So there's a kind of there's a duty to not break that kind of emotional trust. This person just cut their emotions off, and so it's a rare exception to the rule where they open up. And so when people do that bad, it really messes with them a certain way to where they're not knowing how to open up fully. Some people might not open up ever again the right way. So, of course, therapy helps all the way around with all of this. All right. So with that said, I think I've gone on way longer than I need to. So like the video, follow the page. If you like this type of content, I can bring you more of it, but there's definitely more that I can build off of this. It has implications across the board in a lot more things than just talking about, what do you bring to the table? I do want you to understand your value and appreciate the values that other people have. And so that's why I have this discussion, because a lot of folks don't know their value. They don't understand what all comes in the package of what's all on the table. The pros and cons, we all have them. And so we want to make sure that we understand the full nature of who we are. If we like this about somebody else, we have to be willing to take the negatives that come with it, and not focus only on the negatives, but also appreciate the positives that draw you to it in the first place. All right. And that's going to make us better people. So with that said, I'm out of here. You guys have a good evening, and let me know in the comments what you think. All right. Good night. Let's see. Let's throw the music on here for us as we lead out. Again, make sure you follow the page, people. Make sure you follow the page, like the page, and leave a comment. Let's see. Hold on. Where's my music at? Uh-oh. There we go. My music is here. And we're out.